All right, good morning, friends. Time for the hands-free drive to work. And, in Georgia, it's illegal to hold your phone while you drive. So just press play and then let's think through some ideas today that'll help us steer ourselves through the weeds of work. We have been talking about recently, and I know it's a little darker this morning. I started a little earlier than normal, so I got a little light to help us, but you don't have to see to listen. So we've been talking about the fact that met needs necessarily precede any profit or incentive that comes back to me when I work. And if I steer myself in that way, I'm actually lining up with what is actual, what is real. And obviously, if I line up with what is real and actual, rather than what is not real, not true, then I'll be more productive, I'll be more engaged. And a lot of times I know we say, of course, a met need comes before, but just like we said yesterday, why then when I ask people, why do you work? They never say to meet needs. It's always, so that I can make money, or obviously the most obvious one is money. And we said probably because Milton Friedman said the only social responsibility of business is shareholder profit. And so we've taken that all the way down to a personal level. And we just said, the only responsibility of work is to now make my own profits. So we have to think differently about our work, though, if we're ever going to be more productive or more engaged than we are right now. Because we know we'll never act differently until we decide differently, and we'll never decide differently until we think differently. So let's do it. On the way to work this morning, I want to think about just how to think differently about our work, continuing in that same direction as we steer ourselves through the weeds of work. And so I want to share this quote with you. I heard it a while ago, and I will never forget it. It's been very impactful in my life. And the quote is by a man named David Foster Wallace. Around 2000, he received a lot of awards in the literature world, and I can tell you about a lot of his awards, but I won't bore you. David Foster Wallace was seen as, maybe like the next Walt Whitman or something like that. People thought this guy was going to be remembered forever, and he very well may be still. But unfortunately, he committed suicide in 2002, I believe it was. But listen to what David Foster Wallace said about to a college group. He was doing a commencement speech at Kenyon College, and David Foster Wallace said to this group, "Everybody worships." This is what he wanted them to take into their lives. He wanted them to leave college knowing one particular thing. He wanted them to know that everybody worships. And what's so fascinating to me about that, and I actually just stopped, so I'm parking. So what's so fascinating to me about the fact that David Foster Wallace said that is that David Foster Wallace was actually, self-proclaimed. He said he was an atheist. He didn't believe in God. But what he said is that everybody worships. And so if David Foster Wallace said everybody worships, then I wanted to ask, as an atheist, why do you think everybody worships? But he continued on. He said, think about it this way. He said, if you worship money, you'll always feel poor. He said, if you worship power, you'll always feel like you need to one-up somebody, or you need to, you'll always feel weak, is what he said. He said, if you worship intellect, you'll always feel like you need to get smarter and that other people are smarter than you. If you worship beauty, he said, if you worship beauty, then you'll die 1,000 deaths before they finally plant you. That was fairly blunt. So think about what he's saying. He's saying if the very thing that you worship is the thing that you have to have, it's the thing that you'll actually count cost other things. You'll say, okay, even if it costs me money, if I worship beauty, then I'll always have to have beauty. What you worship is the thing that you have to have. Isn't that incredible? And so I started to think about that with our work. I'm like, man, you know what? Every one of us, we work for something. Every one of us work for something. We're working hard to try to make sure that we get something. And for some of us, it's recognition. For some of us, it's money. For some of us, it's just comfort. I work as hard as I have to until, it makes me uncomfortable. Or I work hard sometimes so I can be comfortable other times. Some of it's approval. I want either the people around me to think I'm, good enough, I'm somebody, or even some people say, no, it's not the people around me that I care about. I just want myself to know that I'm somebody. We can work through, and we probably will. We'll probably just pick one of those things and work through. What if you worked for that particular thing? We'll probably work through that in the days ahead. But just for a 30,000 kind of high view, think about if you do that, just like David Foster Wallace said, if you worship, if your whole life needs one thing and you can't do without it, if we do the same thing with our work, and this is what David Foster Wallace said about worship. He said, if you don't choose one, then you've actually subconsciously chosen one. That's what's incredible to me. What he was trying to help these college students say is, if they walked out of there and said, no, I'm not religious even, because he wasn't. He said, if I'm not religious, I don't really worship anything. And he was saying, no, you worship something. He wanted them to know you worship something. And I'm telling you right now, you work for something. If you haven't chosen that thing, and what David Foster Wallace said is, the only thing you get to do is choose what you worship. And so a lot of times he said, if you don't choose, you've just subconsciously chosen and you don't even know what you've chosen. And so I say in the same thing with work. If you don't know what you've chosen as the very guiding purpose of your work, then you've just subconsciously chosen and you're not even sure what it is. But think about this. With your work, I want you to think differently. If you've chosen profits or incentives to be the guiding purpose of your work instead of a met need, then that is the thing that you have to have. And watch how I'll show you, that makes you less productive because you have to have it. If you have to have the profit or incentive, no matter what that profit or incentive is, if you have to have that, then that means when it comes down to meeting a need, which is being productive is meeting a need, being engaged in your work. If it comes down to meeting a need or getting a profit or incentive or getting recognized or getting approval, which one will you take? Of course, if you have to have approval, if you have to have recognition, if you have to have the money, then you won't even be equipped to guide yourself to make the next best decision, to make the next wise move. If the next wise move means that you have to take a small, less recognition or a little smaller profit at the time, which anybody will tell you, there are decisions that anybody who's built a great business or a great brand will tell you there have been times when they've had to take less profits so that they could actually grow in the long run. But if you work for money, if you work for profit, then you have to have it. You can't even put it aside. If you work for recognition, you have to have it. You can't even put it aside. So I feel like, think about all the people that we work around, all the people that you've worked with before. Some people just have to have recognition, and they can't even really do their job well without getting recognition. They can't even really meet needs or be productive without getting that recognition, or they can't do it if they don't get immediate profits sometimes. I don't know about you, but I don't want to work that way. I want to be able to, instead of being guided in my work by something that I can't even control, I want to decide what I work for. And I've decided that I'm going to work to meet needs. And I want every one of you to watch this while you're watching this to decide this morning. That's what I'm going to do. David Foster Wallace said, you don't get to choose if you worship. You only get to choose what you worship. So this morning, you don't get to choose if you work for something. You only get to choose what you work for. So will you decide with me to meet some needs? Thank you guys for listening.